and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Paris Schutz will join us in just a moment. Here's what we're looking at.
No one was moved as a result of Lollapalooza.
Mayor Johnson denies moving hundreds of migrants because of the 4-day music fest kicking off tomorrow.
I never will forget the mistreatment that I experienced for those 4 years.
A 10th lawsuit filed against Northwestern in connection with the school's hazing scandal.
In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial.
Our Spotlight Politics team on the former president's latest indictment.
It can trigger issues that can be costly in the long term.
The problem of underground climate change and why it's giving the loop that sinking feeling. And why thousands of CPS students won't have bus service on the first day of school. And now to Paris for our top story tonight. Paris.
Brandis, a 10th lawsuit has been filed against Northwestern University in connection to hazing allegations in the school's athletics department. Former football player Ramon Diaz claims to have been subjected to hazing, sexual and physical abuse, and racial discrimination, saying his teammates shaved the words Cinco de Mayo on the back of his head.
There's never been a day that's gone by since I graduated in 2008 where I have not forgotten those words. I've not seen a football game in over 10 years because of what happened to me. What would possess any human being, anyone, that's okay, that wouldn't ruin somebody's life, and it certainly did for me.
WTTW News reporter Matt Masterson has been following the growing timeline of events in the wake of Northwestern's hazing scandal and joins us now with more. Matt, what new light has this latest lawsuit shed on the hazing activities allegedly at Northwestern?
Diaz's case involves a lot of the same allegations that previous cases have involving cases of forced nudity, sexual abuse, and different types of hazing. Diaz claimed, though, that former Northwestern football coach Pat Fitzgerald could have stepped in and stopped this, but didn't. Fitzgerald has denied this. But Diaz's case also alleges that he faced racial discrimination against his Mexican heritage, as you said. But what also sticks out is that these involve the oldest allegations thus far in any of these lawsuits against Northwestern, going back well over a decade. Many of the cases involved allegations from the past few years, while this one dates back to when Diaz was a former member of the Northwestern football group program in 2005 to 2008. So it gives a better idea of how long this hazing could have been going on at the university.
And certainly Pat Fitzgerald was on the staff at that point. Right. He was around for this. And this comes a day after Northwestern says it has hired former U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch to come in and do an independent review of the school's reporting process for hazing allegations. Now, Maggie Hickey already did that review. How is this going to be different?
Well, it's hard to say because that initial review has not been made public yet. There's been an executive summary that's released, but the full findings have not been released. So the school now says it wants an outside look at the effectiveness of these hazing reporting mechanisms. But questions have arisen about that initial investigation. How thorough was it? Was it flawed in any way? Attorney Ben Crump, who is representing several of these players who have already filed lawsuits, raised those questions himself, saying, did that go far enough? Why is there a need for this second investigation now?
And it's interesting that the school still has not released the full text of that original investigation. So this is the 10th lawsuit today. Do we expect more?
Yes, it certainly seems that way. Crump, who already represents several players, he said he's planning to file dozens more, maybe 30 or more, and those aren't going to be specifically related just to football. He said it could involve other athletes, other programs as well within Northwestern. There are a women's volleyball player has also filed suit already, and Fitzgerald himself has retained legal counsel, so there's a possibility that he too could file some sort of lawsuit against the university going forward.
Right, it looked like he might be angling for a breach of contract type of lawsuit and to get paid what was on his contract. Matt Masterson, thanks for following us.
Thanks, Paris.
And you can visit Matt's full timeline of the Northwestern hazing scandal on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. And now back to Brandis for some more of today's top stories. Brandis.
In Paris, dozens of migrants who had been staying in a downtown police district station less than 2 miles from Grant Park had been moved into the Broadway Armory in Edgewater. But Mayor Brandon Johnson says it's not because Lollapalooza opens this weekend.
Having full wraparound services for families who wish to call the city of Chicago their home, that is still top of mind. And we have put in place many more facilities online to help families transition. Look, no one should be living in police stations. It's just that no one should be.
Some community members around the Broadway Armory recently protested the end of the Park District programming that happens at the Armory to make space for migrant housing. Last week, city officials told a city council panel there were nearly 950 migrants still sleeping on the floors of police stations and at O'Hare and Midway airports. There's more of this story on our website. More of the state's littlest learners will have access to full-day kindergarten under legislation Governor J.B. Pritzker signed into law today. The law requires every school board to establish full-day kindergarten starting with the 2027-28 school year. The governor's office says the bill also creates a task force to audit the state's existing kindergarten programs, including districts' capacity to make the shift a full day if they don't already offer it, as well as additional costs. The National Education Association says children in full-day classes show greater reading and math achievements than those in half-day classes. The Cook County Treasurer's Office wants to help you better understand your property tax bills. Today, the office released a guide that they say explains how the tax system works, why tax bills are so high, and how property owners can save money. The Treasurer's Office points out that Illinois has the second highest median residential property tax bill of all U.S. states at over $4,400 compared to $2,471 nationwide. And if you're curious for more, be sure to check out our WTTW News Explains series, breaking down how Cook County property tax bills are calculated on our website. Up next, our Spotlight Politics team breaks down former President Trump's latest indictment. Don't go away.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Former President Donald Trump is due in court tomorrow to face his latest indictment. That and the latest on Chicago's migrant crisis in tonight's Spotlight Politics. Joining us this week are Mariah Woelfel from WBEZ and, of course, our own Paris Schutz. So let's start with the indictment. Team, here's what Special Prosecutor Jack Smith said yesterday about Donald Trump's latest indictment.
The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021 was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government.
Paris, are these the most serious charges that Trump is facing?
I think serious in the way Special Counsel Jack Smith is framing it there, what it represents. These alleged conspiracies represent efforts to hold on to power, even though the verdict was rendered. The people spoke, they had elected Joe Biden, and that there is evidence in this document that Donald Trump knew that he lost. There were plenty of credible people that were on Trump's team telling him, you lost, there is no credible evidence to overturn this election, and yet these alleged conspiracies continued. Does it put him in the most legal peril? I would say that those Mar-a-Lago documents cases, because the president is alleged to have obstructed that investigation and not turned over those documents, he's in legal peril with that, too, spending lots of money on lawyers. And by the way, who is really paying for that? Trump voters who contribute to political action committees who then pay these legal bills.
We're going to come to that in a minute. And of course, you know, the other case is the alleged hush money case paid to the adult film star, which is obviously completely different from what he's facing right now in the allegations regarding January 6th. Mariah, he's calling it a Biden witch hunt and an abuse of power. Are election lies covered under free speech?
Well, I think that's certainly going to be a question that is asked at the heart of this case, especially as people are predicting that's going to be part of Donald Trump's defense. You know, does the First Amendment cover free speech that of unpopular opinions that some people may find inaccurate or false? Absolutely. But as far as I know, the First Amendment does not cover using that inaccurate information or lies to try to subvert a U.S. election. And I think that's the thing that that's the step that Special Prosecutor Jack Smith is going to focus on, and also the intent there, that Donald Trump, the former president, had knowledge that this information was inaccurate and used it to try to overturn a U.S. election.
Paris, he's still leading the other GOP candidates for president by double digits, though. Is this going to make a dent? Is this going to slow him down at all?
If past is prologue, no. In the Republican primary, these things have done nothing but perhaps even increase his standing among base voters, because this narrative, this coordinated messaging strategy that this is somehow politicized Justice Department does resonate with those voters. That doesn't sound like much of a legal defense strategy, but it's, you know, with all these Trump things, it's about influencing the court of public opinion, and that's what they want to do here. But then there are Republican strategists that say in a general election, it might not be so good because this makes this a referendum on Donald Trump once again, not a referendum on the 4 years of President Joe Biden, which they want.
Right. So, I mean, it kind of comes down then to, you know, okay, if he comes away with the Republican nomination, but then how would he fare in a general election? Mariah, he's raising money off of these indictments, but as Paris mentioned, his expenditure reports show that he's spending it all on attorneys.
Yeah, $40 million to legal fees, and not just for himself, for anyone who's really being wrapped up in this case. Donald Trump has offered, you know, people who have asked for help, he has offered legal representation. And I think there's questions about whether there's, you know, some sort of attempt to buy loyalty to Trump because of that. And of course, you know, these are PAC contributions. These are small donations from Trump supporters that are paying these legal fees. A spokesperson for Trump told the Washington Post that this is, you know, all to just help innocent people from unlawful harassment by prosecutors.
Paris, what happens if he's found guilty of felonies before the 2024 election?
Well, Brandis, I went and reviewed my Constitution, and I don't think this scenario was really written about there.
We're way into uncharted territory.
You know, let's go
at this
back
point.
to Governor Rod Blagojevich. Per state law, once he was convicted of his felonies, he couldn't run for any state office again, but he had joked about, or maybe not joked about, moving to another state, running for Congress, because there is no such provision about being convicted of a felony and running for federal office. And then if he is elected and he's convicted and has to serve jail time, there's certainly no real answer to what happens then, although it does appear very likely he would either pardon himself or order his DOJ to drop all of these investigations.
No precedent for any of this.
No.
So as we've mentioned, hundreds of migrants were moved yesterday, some from police stations, some from college dorms. Mariah, some are saying that this was done ahead of Lollapalooza and that this is a political move.
Well, Mayor Brandon Johnson is vehemently denying that, saying that his overall strategy is to decompress police stations and get people out of, you know, those temporary lobbies, sleeping on floors. There's more than 950 people sleeping on police station floors, waiting to go to these shelters. And he's saying, he went so far as to say, migrants were happy to be moved out and finally moved to a shelter. That being said, there are people who want to stay where they are, who are happy, you know, waiting for affordable housing in police stations. And so it's hard to decipher, but, you know, you do have to question, you know, whether that's a political move as hundreds of thousands of people descend downtown and the city wants to look good and they want them to spend tourism dollars and keep coming back. And that's going to be a question for the DNC in 2024 as well. Major events, you know, coming to Chicago.
Of course, the timing, the location, because we know they are staying in police district stations that are not just downtown. Paris, Mariah mentioned the DNC. Does the mayor actually have a plan as that gets closer?
Well, it's a year away, but it doesn't seem like there's a cohesive plan yet. And the only thing I can glean is this stuff is coming so fast and furious for this administration that they don't have time to come up with some overarching plan. The buses just keep coming every day, something like 60 bus loads since he took over. So they have to go with these makeshift plans. But the same thing happened with the last administration. And it seems like it's a gauntlet. Every community that they go to, they get some kind of pushback. Here, earlier in the year, we reported on an abandoned Kmart on the southwest side, an industrial area. Okay, well, that shouldn't get pushback, but it did from the local officials, so they canceled those plans. That was a state plan. It's hard to imagine any comprehensive plan that doesn't involve the region, not just the city, but the region and the state and federal help.
We've got about 15 seconds. Mariah, WBEZ spent a day with migrants. Are there ways to help?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a resource list on our website. Nonprofits are taking donations. They're taking monetary donations. And I know people have, you know, items that they want to donate to. The city has a website up. It's chicago.org/new arrivals that kind of lists those resources.
Okay. Mariah Woelfel, Paris. Thanks, everybody. That's Spotlight.
Thank you.
Up next, we explore the phenomenon of underground climate change right after this.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
July is shaping up to be the warmest month on Earth in recorded history. But that heat isn't just impacting the atmosphere, it's having an impact on the ground beneath our feet. New research from Northwestern University illuminates the phenomena of underground climate change, and it is giving Chicago's Loop that sinking feeling.
If you blink, you'll miss them. Dozens of tiny temperature sensors set up underground in the Millennium Park train station.
25 degrees Celsius.
25 degrees Celsius. And I can do the conversion, probably 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit.
The sensors record the subsurface temperature every 10 minutes. Northwestern engineering professor Alessandro Rocha-Loria analyzes tens of thousands of readings every day. The data points to a phenomenon occurring below the ground. Above ground, the climate is warming. Beneath the surface, temperatures are rising as well, some years by as much as ½ a degree Celsius. It's felt most acutely in so-called subsurface heat islands, like this train station.
When trains break, they release heat, at least most of the trains. Lighting systems release heat, we humans produce heat. So all of that adds up and it produces heat.
Where does it go then?
In the ground. So you can consider that around any underground structure, such as a basement or a tunnel, there is you could call it a bubble of heat forming.
Loria says the heat causes the soil and construction materials to deform. That's making the ground beneath the loop sink by a few millimeters every year. But fear not, Loria is not predicting catastrophe just yet.
I am convinced of the fact that we're not talking about the potential collapse of structures, but potentially functional problems. Problems related to excessive settlement, angular distortion of structural members, tilting, and potentially cracking.
Loria and his team initially set up 150 subsurface sensors in all in big public spaces like the train station and Millennium parking garage, as well as in the basements of 30 buildings where boilers can significantly impact the subsurface temperature. Loria says his research offers an opportunity for engineers to build more efficiently.
We could absorb at least a part of that heat, bring it, if you want, upstairs, or in any case in buildings and infrastructures, and use it for space heating and hot water.
He says that could lead to significant reductions in a building's heating bill. And he says Chicago is not alone. London, New York, and any densely built urban area is undergoing the same phenomenon. And he says those cities should address the problem before it gets worse.
The Northwestern study predicts that underground temperatures will continue to rise between 0.1 and 2.5 degrees Celsius every decade. And up next, what Chicago Public Schools plans to do about the school bus driver shortage. But first, we take a look at the weather above the ground.
Chicago Public School students return to the class in less than 3 weeks. That is, if they can get to school. The district says it currently only has about half of the bus drivers it needs to transport students who qualify to be bused to school. While CPS cites a nationwide shortage of school bus drivers since the COVID-19 pandemic, parents say it's a perennial problem. Joining us now with more is Charles Mayfield, Chief Operating Officer for Chicago Public Schools. Charles, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So more than 17,000 CPS students are eligible to be bused to school, but at the moment you've only got transportation lined up for about 7,000 of them. And as we mentioned, that's about half of the 1,300 drivers that you need. What are some of the reasons for this shortage of drivers?
Well, first and foremost, I know this is a significant change to parents. This was a tough decision that we needed to make. And this is not only a Chicago issue, it's happening across school districts of America. And in this case, with the bus driver shortage, we made some changes over time. Last year, we opted to change our board policy where we would prioritize our students that needed transportation, who were most vulnerable. So those are our diverse learner students and our students in temporary living situations. In this case, it was a tough decision to make, where we decided we can only transport the most vulnerable students due to that bus driver shortage for a number of reasons. That population is mostly retirees, and that population hasn't returned to the market, post-pandemic.
Would
Also,
you
the
say it's
split
been
schedule.
the split schedule sounds like one challenge. Would you say it's a matter of pay not being enough to attract drivers? Is there something else that's failing to hire more
Yeah,
drivers?
the split schedule is another, in a sense, where you have an AM route and a PM route, and some folks don't feel comfortable with that, especially with the options that they have, with driving services where they don't have to transport students, and then the pay. So another change that we made was we increased the pay. The average pay rate right now is between $20 to $25 as of last year, and we're continuing to work with our vendors to promote more hiring fairs. In our case, we're completely outsourced, so we use vendors for said services, not only for bus services, we also use them for paratransit services, the smaller vehicles that transport students, and we even went above and beyond and used taxis to try to get kids to school on time. So those were some of the changes that we made, but it's been a continuing problem that hasn't gone away, and we had to make this tough decision at this juncture.
We spoke to one CPS parent who has 3 children at 3 different Chicago public schools. 2 of her children qualify to be bused to school because they both have IEPs, independent educational plans. Here's what she told us.
CPS has a problem with transporting kids. They always have. And every year, CPS comes up with a new way to try to get sympathy or empathy from the general public who doesn't understand what it's really like in Chicago public schools. So there's always a reason why they cannot successfully transport our children. But really, it's just poor planning. There's just no different way to say it than they are not thinking about how are we going to get our kids from point A to point B. Every year they act like this is a surprise.
Charles, of course, it's a tough spot for you and parents, but how do you respond to, a very clearly frustrated parent who says that it's not so much about a driver shortage as much as it is about the district not planning far enough in advance?
Again, I know a tough decision was made that will impacts families. I understand that. I sympathize with that. I also know that we had some deadlines out there that we were trying to get in as many transportation requests so that we could assess the market. It's difficult for us to make a decision without knowing how many students we need to provide transportation to. We had a deadline in May, right before the school year ended, so we can properly plan for next year, and we got some of those transportation requests in, but not enough to be able to make a decision. We then extended the date to July 3rd to be able to get more in, and even had some of the transportation team making calls to make sure that those requests were received. And once we got, we felt like enough of the population to be able to make a decision, then we had to make the tough decision because we just did not have enough drivers to be able to transport all students. And keep in mind, the driver population fluctuates. You do have drivers that don't come back for summer or don't come back for the beginning of the school year. And when we looked at our numbers, we noticed that we were right about half, and that wouldn't be enough to transport all students, especially with the number of increases that we've received for our diverse learner population, which continues to grow year over year.
Now, CPS is offering a travel stipend of up to $500 a month for parents whose children qualify to be bused and for whom a bus service is not available. Is $500 enough? What do you advise parents?
So that's an option that we offer to parents to self-transport, and I'm glad you shared that because that's a piece of information that I think is truly important. So it's up to $500 per month if they choose to opt in. That equates to about $25 a day for attendance days. The other option that we're also offering for the general education families is the CTA Venture Card, where they will have one free card for the student and one companion pass so that they can get transportation to the school that they are assigned to. And last but not least, for the diverse learner and STLS population that opts to choose transportation and that doesn't have transportation day one, because we did have a certain cutoff date to be able to route that particular population. So as of Monday, if we did not have your transportation request in, you won't be routed the first day, but we will provide you $25 a day until you're routed. And it typically takes up to 2 weeks to get routed after the first day of school.
Okay, and of course, we know you reported yesterday that so far 3,000 families have taken you up on the district's stipend offer. Of course, more to come. We'll see how it all works out on the first day of school in a few weeks. Charles Mayfield, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good day.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this. And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app, and join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm, and proud sponsor of programming that offers advice and strategies to enhance the physical and mental well-being of fellow legal practitioners in Illinois.